Carl and Ellie could have adopted. Why did they just, I mean, if they really wanted to have kids, why didn't they just adopt? This might be something of a third rail topic, but it caught my interest, and I'm curious to see what they have to say. I'm talking about this article from Vox called The Fertility Conversation We're Not Having by Rachel Cohen. For those of you who haven't ventured into some other corners of the internet, like the dating coaches and such, there is this concept of the biological clock for women, which exists because, objectively speaking, I want to be very clear, women do run out of time for being able to have kids, whereas men can, well, they, let's just say the sperm factory doesn't shut down the same way that, in the same way as the women's reproductive system, because if I remember ninth grade health class correctly, women have a finite number of eggs, whereas men, they just produce sperm non-stop. That's why Al Pacino was able to father a child at, how old is he? He had a kid at 83 or 84, maybe. Recently, he fathered a kid in his 80s. That's past life expectancy. He is about the same age as my grandparents. Let that sink in. Whereas for women, it can vary on whether they can start, on when their reproductive capabilities end. Because according to Gerber Johnson, if a woman has kids, then she stays fertile for longer. Apparently, that prolongs menopause, pushes off menopause. TLDR, he's like 15 to 20 years younger than his older sisters. DBDR's mother had him at 38, and he was the only child of hers. And according to him, the reason that, okay, according to him, he had the issues that he had because his mom had him at 38. He said it, not me. But let's see what the article has to say about this. Let's see what Rachel Cohen has to say about all of this. Full disclosure, I did skim through it a little, but now I'm going to read it with you. Everyone should have the right to decide if and when they have children. I completely agree. Yet over the past 50 years, the US has built an economy that increasingly works against fertility, demanding more years in school and longer hours at work for people, especially women, in the years when it is biologically easiest for them to have children, and concentrating wealth and income among those past their reproductive prime. As a result, American schools and workplaces are particularly ill suited for supporting those who hope to start families earlier than average. If I were to complain about how society has wronged me as a woman, it would be that it has treated my limited fertility time with extra disregard, wrote Ruxandra Teslo, a genomics PhD student, recently on Substack. At each step of the way, I was encouraged to be patient, do more training, told that things will figure themselves out, even when I wanted and could have speed run through things. The average age of a new mom is now 27 and a half, up from age 21 in 1970. I had no interest in having kids in my early 20s, but there are certainly reasons others might want that. Fertility decreases with age, and some find it easier to keep up with young children when they themselves are younger and have more energy. Others hope for larger families, so may need to start conceiving earlier, or may prioritize making sure their own parents have many years to spend with grandkids. Wow! They're actually agreeing with Matt Walsh here, because I remember seeing a video where he said something about how it's easier to keep up with young children when you yourself are in your early 20s or so. That's for both men and women, by the way. Yes, you can take care of yourself with working out and eating right and such, but it's more of an uphill battle. And yeah, you can argue that in your 30s or beyond, you're more likely to throw out your back or something. And of course, there's the question of whether you'll be around for their future, which, okay, that's a bit of a morbid thing, but objectively speaking, the older you are when you have your kids, the less time you are going to have for being with them. Why am I talking about this as someone who doesn't want to have kids? I want to see what the reasoning is because I can also recognize that it's for the greater good that people do have kids, but I wholeheartedly agree with the opening sentence that everyone should have the right to decide if and when they have children. Getting back to the article, of course, discussing reproductive timelines is fraught. Having others invoke the fact that women experience a decline in fertility with age feels intrusive and insensitive, and the conversation is even trickier today when anti abortion activists are pushing a conservative pro baby agenda from the highest echelons of government, and the Heritage Foundation is putting out literature blaming falling birth rates on too many people going to graduate school. The evidence for that is very weak. I mean, you can argue they don't see the way to balance both, so they're opting to push off having kids sooner because of that. Just food for thought. Yet it's precisely in such moments that progressive leaders should offer clear alternatives that both respect women's autonomy and ensure people can make less constrained choices. If mainstream feminism ignores the barriers to early parenthood, the right will be all too eager to fill the void. If the so called feminists, as long as they play it by the elite rules, refuse to take seriously what we can do to support young families, then the right can move in and say, you might as well give up on your stupid ideas and career aspirations, marriage historian Stephanie Kuntz told me. Not everyone wants to become a parent, but most women do still say they wish to have children one day. If we're serious about reproductive justice, then it's a mistake to ignore how our schools and workplaces have evolved to be broadly hostile to both fertility and parenthood. Having kids at a younger age is not inherently better, but for those who want to do it, The economy shouldn't be working against them at every step. Morally, it's not inherently better to have your kids in your early 20s versus your early 30s, if you're having kids at all. But objectively speaking, you have more time. Not to mention, it's a lot easier. You don't have to resort to expensive IVF treatments and such. Kind of like what Chuck Norris did for with his wife Gina for their twins Dakota and Danny Lee. They went through this whole process where Chuck reversed his vasectomy, and then there were a great many complications. Thankfully, Dakota and Danny Lee were born healthy, but it still involved a lot of medical intervention that you don't need when you're younger. And when I say that, I mean early 20s. That's why that was the usual age, historically speaking. Honestly, I would argue that if you put it off for too long, or if you have a change of heart when you're 40, just go with adoption. Make it easier on yourself. Although if you do want to burn the money to for something like IVF, I mean, I can't tell you not to do it, but again, it would be simpler to adopt and have one less child in the foster care system. Colleges need to support parents, pregnant students, and prospective parents. Many women believe, correctly, that college and graduate education are important paths not only for their own financial well being, but also to afford raising kids in a country that offers so little support to families. The idea that people can just up and abandon higher education to have kids, per the Heritage Foundation, isn't serious. We've just done so much to obscure the reality and to make it seem like, oh, moms are asking for too much, or they're postponing too long, or maybe they shouldn't be going to school so much, said Jennifer Glass, sociologist at University of Texas Austin, who studies fertility and gender. What an idiotic thing to say. The only way that women can get wages that are at all comparable to what's necessary to raise a family is by getting a college degree. Um, I'm gonna have to push back on that a little. Unfortunately, college degrees are not a silver bullet for making your life better. Unless you go in knowing exactly what you want to do, you have a plan, and you follow through on that plan. And of course, most importantly, you get the job that you need and you do that job. Yet the US has built one of the longest, most expensive educational pipelines in the world. One reason many American students take longer to finish undergraduate degrees or don't finish at all is because of financial pressures that students abroad don't face. Nations like Germany, France, and Norway offer free or heavily subsidized university education, while others, including the UK and Australia, have manageable, easily navigable, income based repayment systems. American students are more likely to be juggling multiple jobs alongside coursework, stretching the time to graduation. The timeline stretches even longer for medical, legal, and doctoral degrees, tacking on years of extra training and credentialing that aren't required elsewhere. Gonna have to disagree with you on that just a little. I would much rather have a doctor who went to multiple years of medical school and is certified to be able to do their thing. Legal, like lawyers, yeah, I want them highly trained. Look, would you rather have Lionel Hutz be your lawyer, or would you rather have a lawyer who has gone through the training to be able to, what's the best way to describe it? To hold themselves together in court and not become argumentative, which is kind of why you don't want to be your own attorney. The reason you hire an attorney in the first place is that they can advise you and then they can argue on your behalf rather than having to go up there, because if you're presented with evidence that you really don't like, you're more likely to get emotional and kind of disprove your case or help the prosecution. Whereas a lawyer who is not personally involved in this would be able to argue a lot more objectively because they were trained to do that. Again, a lot of other college degree things are kind of silly. Like, I don't think you should need a college degree to work in a TV station. You know what? I'm beginning to think I should have just applied to those directly when I was 18 instead of going to college, if I really wanted to do that. Or I should have gone out to Hollywood for a certain amount of time after I graduated high school to try and make it work. Unfortunately, that was 10 years ago, so I don't really have the option to do that now. Though, let me know in the comments down below if you think the Hollywood arc would be an interesting one to see here on the channel. Getting back to the article, there's been an increase in the number of years of schooling that is totally unnecessary. Claudia Goldin, a Harvard economist and Nobel Prize winner, told me, pointing to, among other factors, the explosion of postdocs and predocs, plus pressure for applicants to acquire some work experience before even beginning their graduate studies. Chicken or the egg? How do we get the experience if we need a degree? How do we get the degree if we don't have the job to fund the degree? I went to graduate school immediately after college, and schools like U Chicago and MIT had rules that if you were there for more than 4 years, you paid tuition. So that incentivized people to finish, she said. So they basically try to discourage super seniors. When educational timelines keep stretching with no structural support for parenting, the result is predictable. Some people delay having children or abandon those plans entirely. Yeah, this gets to what I want to talk about with this. Again, as someone who has no interest in having kids, I think the system needs to do better in not discouraging people who would actually be good parents, who would actually make the sacrifices in their personal lives that are necessary to be a good parent. Yes, at a certain point, you have to just accept that things are going to be the way they are and either figure it out or accept that it's not feasible. That being said, I do think that if JD Vance were more serious about, quote, wanting more babies in the US, I think some reforms are necessary. Not a complete revolution, just a few reforms. Honestly, I've actually thought about this a bit on how maybe women's timelines could be tailored to. I thought about the possibility of tailoring women's timelines to accommodate this biological clock, except who knows how long it would take to get the last child moved out of the house to fly the nest, assuming that's technically possible with housing prices being where it's at. Like, I've thought about maybe tailoring it so women go to college later, but I'm gonna guess that would probably be violate some kind of discrimination laws. Not to mention, I'm probably gonna get some comments and the raging against that. And go ahead. Again, this is just something I've thought about in the past because right now I realized that might not work out as well. And as I think about it right now, I also realize that the human factor of aging for both sexes can be a detriment. Like, women who are in their 40s would be in the same playing field as the 18-year-old men with more energy. Objectively speaking, because of age. Yeah, you get the idea. And that being said, I'm trying to think of a way how to phrase this. Yeah, to sum up, it would probably violate some discrimination laws. Not to mention, an older woman would have a harder time because after the age of 25, the brain solidifies, they're more set in their ways. Learning is a lot more difficult, and that's for both men and women, mind you. Hence why it would be discriminatory. But anyway, getting back to the article, this isn't to say there are no parents on university campuses. There are roughly 3 million undergraduates, 1 in 5 college students, in the US today who have kids. But student parents are too often rendered invisible because most colleges don't collect data on them and harbor outdated assumptions about who even seeks higher education. Where's that 3 million come from? Colleges and universities still cater to what is considered traditional students. So, 18 to 24-year-olds who are getting financial assistance from their parents. said Jennifer Turner, a sociologist at the Institute for Women's Policy Research. Fun fact, I have a friend who's about 2 years younger than me who's doing college. So, for context, he's 26. I should really ask him what it's like to be the old man on campus. Now, yes, it would probably be kind of awkward for a 19 or 20-year-old hanging out with a 26-year-old. Like, in terms of just generational differences, because that's about 6 to 7 years age difference. What would they really have to talk about? And again, it would just feel a little odd. I don't know. You let me know in the comments down below if you happen to be an older college student who lives in dorms with the 20 to 22-year olds. I'd be genuinely curious. Anyway, back to the article. Student parents are far less likely to be receiving financial help from their own families than students of the same age and background without kids. And in general, they're more likely to struggle to afford basic needs. But most campuses neglect their unique challenges and fail to provide them with resources like on campus housing, kid friendly spaces, and childcare support. That's not a bad idea. I mean, I think I've heard of marital campus housing. Don't quote me on that. Getting back to the article. The Trump administration's new budget proposal calls for gutting the only federal program that helps student parents with childcare. And while pregnant students are entitled to some federal protections under the ADA and Title IX, in practice, many students never even learn about them or face intense stigma for using them. If I had to guess, they probably don't feel like it's worth the effort. They would probably feel there would be some kind of resentment. That's probably that's my best guess. For graduate students in particular, there's no shortage of examples of students receiving both implicit and explicit signals to delay childbearing. Research found women were twice as likely as men to cite childcare and parenting as reasons for leaving academia. I wonder why. Probably because they're the ones who give birth and then have to recover, and then they're usually doing more of the child care, which is just objectively what happens a lot of the time. They do have to take maternity leave. Okay, let's get back to the article. Financial fears are not irrational. Whether or not women want to have children in their early to mid 20s, many feel they can't, because the career paths they pursue require longer routes to stability. Women are more often funneled into professions that demand extra time, whether through extended schooling, slower advancement, or the need to earn credentials to prove themselves. Many fields where women are concentrated, like education, social work, psychology, and nursing, require graduate training for higher paying roles. In contrast, men are more likely to enter skilled trades or businesses where higher earnings are possible without advanced degrees. Blue collar work. Golden, the economist, pointed to the problem of the rat race equilibrium, where individuals overinvest accumulating credentials not because doing so is intrinsically valuable, but because everyone else is doing the same. In this situation, falling behind the pack carries higher costs. People want a great job, so they stay in graduate school too long. Firms want the best lawyers, so they keep associates for too long. I don't know what the optimal length is, but I do know that the addition of so many more years means that women will be more discouraged than will men, she told me. These extended educational timelines feed directly into jobs that are also not designed to support parenting during a woman's prime childbearing years. Early career workers typically earn less, have more precarious roles and rigid schedules, and often face more pressure to be fully available to employers to prove their commitment and worth. Unfortunately, that is the reality of entry level jobs. I actually saw this play out in Platonic, show on Apple TV Plus. Rose Byrne played a stay at home mom who returned to the workforce after 13 years out of the picture. She has a law degree. She was an associate. She went back to being an associate at the age of. How old is Rose Byrne? I'm just going to use her age as a reference. Okay, 45 years old. Yeah, Rose Byrne. So let's say their character is 43 because Platonic aired 2 years ago now. So let's just say early 40s. Yeah, she had to stay well after the partners left, and she had to do all the other things that, let's see what it says, that an associate has to do. Yeah, it's kind of why she left the workforce in the first place. I guess because she couldn't balance it. The whole show is about her coming back to that before. I'm not going to spoil it. Let's get back to the article. Should try to finish this at some point today. These extended educational timelines feed directly into jobs that are also not designed to support parenting during a woman's prime childbearing years. Early career workers typically earn less. Oh, wait, I already read that part. But yeah, the really quick, more pressure to be fully available to employers to prove their commitment and worth is why Rose Byrne's character stayed so late, despite the fact that she actually had a family to get home to. Some of them move on to what Golden calls greedy careers: law firms, consulting companies, and hospitals that demand total availability, rewarding those who can work weekends and penalizing those who seek more predictable schedules. For many parents, it's a double bind. The educational trajectories and high-paying jobs make raising kids affordable are often the same ones with demands that make balancing family life nearly impossible. Yeah, some of the child-free YouTubers I've watched have also argued this is discrimination against people who don't have kids because they have to essentially prioritize. letting parents get back to their kids. Honestly, I think I have an article bookmarked that I meant to read that gets into this. But yeah, at a certain point, I guess you can argue that you should be willing to give up some personal time to provide. I think this is why, traditionally speaking, most of these were male dominated while the wife was at home raising the kids so that the man could work those nights and weekends to provide, and then the kids would have someone. I think I've said before in my past videos that my parents just structured their work schedules so that my mom worked in person in the morning while my dad was home, and then my mom would come home around lunchtime, and then she would be home while my dad went off to work from like noon or 1 until well into the night. I'm gonna. My memory's a little fuzzy on this because this was well over 20 years ago now. It was when my brother got into elementary school, and all three of us were past kindergarten, that my dad worked a more typical hours. I think my mom as well. One of them was always back by 3 o'clock to pick us up from school. It was a real revelation when I was in 6th grade that I got out earlier than my siblings and was able to get home before my parents. We can structure society differently. Fertility tech hasn't yet conquered the biological clock, but we did build this economy, which means we can rebuild it differently. Advocating for more efficient and more affordable education isn't a retreat from academic excellence, but a clear-eyed confrontation with institutions that remain indifferent at best to having children. The most forward-thinking places will see that compressed, focused educational paths aren't diluting standards, but respecting the fullness of human lives and creating systems where intellectual achievement doesn't demand reproductive sacrifice. Exactly how to help students manage timelines will vary. For those looking at careers in math and science, for example, there may be opportunities to take advanced courses in high school. Others would benefit from more financial aid or using experiential learning credit or enrolling in accelerated BA MA programs. Some employers should be rethinking their mandate for college degrees at all. I completely agree with that. Stop worrying about degrees. Employers, if you are listening, let people prove their worth. Stop worrying about degrees. Make entry level jobs entry level where no experience, no degree required. Just, are you willing to put in the effort? Yes or no? And I'm saying this for both the benefit of men and women. Make it easier for women to get their foot in the door so that they don't have to delay having kids and use their finite time, lose what they don't have to wait out their biological clock if they want to have kids in the first place. And stop making men have to jump through so many hoops. Well, stop making people in general stop jumping from My train of thought is getting derailed because I am wholeheartedly in agreement with this point about getting rid of mandates for college degrees. Education should only be required for medical fields and the law. If you have more that you think should have educational requirements, like actual requirements that make sense, let me know in the comments down below. Because I'm realizing that it never made sense for there to be a college degree for working in a TV station. I say that because that was what I studied in college. But even with educational reforms, parents would still face legal barriers that other groups don't. It's still legal in many cases to discriminate against parents in hiring or housing. Many parents, making parents a protected class would be a straightforward step toward making parenthood more compatible with economic security. I mean, it would be nice on paper, but let's be real. Their lawyers would find other ways to be able to discriminate. Like, for example, someone wants to get a job and they don't want to hire that person, they just say the position has already been filled. Or they have to say something very tight knit that doesn't even hint at the possibility of discrimination because if you say the wrong thing, you can be sued. Stronger labor regulations could also curb workplace coercion, and policies like those in Scandinavia, which allow parents to reduce their work hours when raising young children, could make it easier to balance kids with holding down a job. We could also, honestly, this is exactly why I say that pay should be based on task and not based on a number of hours. Like, let's say you were paid the same amount for 8 hours of work and you managed to get it done in like 4. You should not lose money just because you happen to get it done in half the time it took. Either we should be paid by the task now, and people who are able to finish things quickly and efficiently and well, they should be able to be free. They should be free to manage their time efficiently so that they can make their money and be able to raise their kids. Or we have to figure something else out. Or we have to just accept that there are going to be personal sacrifices made if you have a kid. The rise of remote work offers additional paths forward, and expanding it could reduce the stark either or choices many prospective parents face. And there are other policy ideas that could make parenthood more affordable even when people are early in their career. Other high income countries offer parents a monthly child allowances, baby bonuses, subsidized childcare, and paid parental leave. The US could follow suit and go further by investing in affordable housing, reduce the cost of college, and decoupling healthcare from employment. Wow, Rachel Cohen must have watched one of my videos about keeping health insurance separate from jobs. I am wholeheartedly on board with that last point because I don't care what the haters in the comments said about how it's actually not that bad of a system, or how an employer can absorb the economic impact. No, we have to keep it separate from jobs. Keep it separate from the government too. I'm not a single payer, universal healthcare kind of guy. They have that in Canada. I told you about the video of the woman who had to wait 13 months to get a brain scan to identify a possible tumor that, assuming it's there, could probably metastasize in that time. And let's just say she'd be lucky to actually make that appointment in 2026 if that were the case. Whereas here in America, yeah, it's annoying. Yeah, the health insurance companies aren't perfect, but you have the option to go into debt if you want to stay alive. You have that option. And most of the time, health insurance will cover things like that brain scan we were talking about earlier. Or for me personally, from my personal experience 2 months ago now, the CAT scan for my back that proved Henry did not have a kidney stone. There was some worrying evidence in the there was a worrying red flag in the form of something from a sample they took. But the CAT scan confirmed my back pain was not a kidney stone. I mean, the doctor was he ruled it out because I was able to pinpoint exactly when the pain began, whereas it would have been more subtle over time. But that being said, the insurance company still saw that there was reasonable concern that there was a kidney stone. So they approved the CAT scan that I ultimately paid $30 out of pocket for. Again, it's not perfect, but I would rather pay $30 out of pocket in addition to what I've been paid for the health insurance up to that point than have to wait an insane amount of time where I'd be lucky to be alive in certain situations. In that particular instance, I would be lucky if I could actually I'd be lucky if I didn't lose my ability to walk or something, or let's say it actually was a kidney stone and I was put on a 13-month wait list for a CAT scan. I might have to consider myself lucky to have kidneys after that. Or, I don't know, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what happens if kidney stones go untreated for way too long. For now, our current system abdicates responsibility. As Glass points out, while parents are paying more to have children, it's employers and governments that reap the benefits of those adult workers and taxpayers, without shouldering the decades long costs of training and raising them. You know, I actually watched a video that talked about how, with the declining birth rate and the imminent population collapse here in America, because the generations that were born, the generation that was the younger Zoomers and the older Gen Alphas, they're going to be turning 18. There aren't as many of them, so there won't be as many 18-year-olds in 2030. They said that video said it might actually be a good thing because wages would go up because the employers would have to compete for workers rather than workers competing for jobs. Just some food for thought. You let me know in the comments if you think that makes sense or if you disagree with that for whatever reason. What no one wants to face is that 150 years ago, when everyone lived on farms, having children did not make you poor, but they do today, said Glass. Children used to benefit their parents. They were part of the dominion of the patriarch. And when children did well, the patriarch benefited. Now it's employers and governments who benefit from well-raised children. Yeah, children could also work the farms 150 years ago. That's from another video that I watched, where basically children have gone from being an asset to a responsibility slash liability. It's not feminist to ignore this. I understand the reluctance to have these conversations. We don't want the government poking around in our bedrooms, especially when some lawmakers are already on a mission to restrict reproductive freedom. It's tempting to say policymakers and institutions should just shut up about any further discussion regarding having kids. But that's not serving people either. Many other countries already confront these challenges with much more deliberate care. Honest conversations about fertility don't need to be about telling women when or whether to have children. They should be about removing the artificial barriers that make it feel impossible to have kids at different stages of life. This would all certainly be much easier if men stepped up to take these pressures more seriously. If men felt as compelled as women to take time off, if men were experiencing the same thing, I think we'd get a lot more creative, said Kuntz. We should continue investing in fertility technology and expanding access to those options for people who want to delay childbearing or may need help conceiving. But IVF and egg freezing are never going to be the right tools for everyone. And people deserve the support to have children as they study and enter the workforce too. Biology isn't destiny, but we shouldn't ignore it. Fair point on all that. Like I said earlier, for IVF, I think it overcomplicates it. Like if you push it off too long and you end up not being able to conceive, or if you have a sudden change of heart at the age of 40, whether you're a woman post menopause or you're a man who maybe has found out that he's sterile and not by choice by getting a vasectomy. I'm talking like Homer Simpson after working in the nuclear power plant or something along those lines. I would argue that adoption is simply easier. You can choose a, you can maybe adopt a kid who's already a little older. I get wanting to adopt them before while they're still too young to remember being in an orphanage or whatever. But I would argue if you're in that camp, older, unable to have kids through the traditional means, unable to have biological children of your own like Carl and Ellie. I never understood why Carl and Ellie didn't just adopt. I mean, I know I'm going off on a random tangent about a movie that came out 16 years ago, but Carl and Ellie could have adopted. Why did they just. I mean, if they really wanted to have kids, why didn't they just adopt? Sorry, this actually got me thinking about that. But again, if you want to burn money on IVF, by all means, I can't tell you not to. But I would definitely recommend adopting for the sake of getting a kid who's in a terrible situation out of that terrible situation if you're in a position to provide the stability they need. But I digress. I think I'm going to leave it here for the video because I've gone on way too long about this, especially as someone who doesn't want to have kids of their own. But I wanted to talk about this because I was curious to see what they would say about the biological clock. Quite frankly, I think there are ways to make it work. But you let me know in the comments down below what you think is the best solution. Just know that there aren't going to be any perfect solutions. There are always going to be trade-offs in some capacity. So give this video a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe for daily uploads. I'll see you soon.